Welcome to Robotics and Automation News webinars, where you can be part of a global event without leaving your home or office. Attend our live webinars and communicate directly with influential professionals in your industry.
Hello, my name is Abdul Montakim. I'm editor of robotics and automationnews.com. Today we bring you an excellent presentation on what might otherwise be an obscure subject, even if it is fundamental to all businesses: pricing. The presentation is given by Barrett Thompson, General Manager of Commercial Excellence at a company called Zilliant, which specialises in using artificial intelligence to monitor all the prices and quotes your company may be offering and agreeing with your customers, and optimising these prices so you can maximise your revenues. It's not as complicated as I'm making it sound, but it's definitely highly sophisticated. Thompson explains the Zilliant system, as well as many related concepts, in some depth in his presentation, after which I ask him a few questions.
Thank you, Abdul. It's a pleasure to be with you and to speak to this group this morning. My name is Barrett Thompson, and I lead the business solutions team at Zilliant. And what we do is we're helping customers identify what kind of issues they're really facing in their sales organization when it comes to pricing and sales effectiveness. And then we're helping them catch the vision for how to apply AI technology to improve both of those things. I've been in pricing and sales effectiveness for over 20 years. I have a formal background in mathematics and operations research. So my title this morning is AI Driving Actionable Sales Intelligence in Manufacturing. And we're going to unpack what that means and how it applies in the business world today. I described myself, and not surprisingly, I'm working at a company where our focus is on B2B enterprises, and we're turning their data, transactional data, market data, product data, customer data, into actionable intelligence for the frontline commercial teams in order to accelerate profitable growth. And so there's a number of elements that come together in such a pursuit: domain experience in the industry. What does it mean in B2B manufacturing? What's really going on there? What are the trends? What are the challenges? What are the conventions that we need to think about? Artificial intelligence technology, and boy, hasn't that grown and gotten so much attention, and rightly so. In the last 5 years, it's really taken huge steps forward in its applicability and its impact on the front line. And some other components come in there as well, but there's an idea that I want to start with, and we're going to finish with it as well today: maximizing the immediate value of every transaction, every order line that's purchased from a customer, as well as the lifetime value of each of those customers. That's an ambitious pursuit, but those two things are being greatly enhanced in the world today, and we're going to get into that. In fact, Zilliant has been helping customers for more than 2 decades, manufacturers and distributors both around the world. Here's an example of some of the customers where we've applied this technology and seen the kind of dramatic improvements that I'm going to be sharing with you today, and using the approaches we're talking about today. So let's come back to the context for B2B companies. What is the situation that we find ourselves in the last several years? What we have seen and what we're hearing over and over again from the customers with whom we work is that there is a convergence of forces that's really shifting the landscape. And I think some of these will be familiar if we just look around this ring in the center. Who among us is not experiencing margin pressure? Raise your hand. You may get the gold star, because I think it's the number one thing that I hear about the manufacturing space. And that is driven, of course, by the usual raw material cost inflation, energy cost, labor cost. Oh yes, let's not forget the tariffs and so on. Low unemployment, driving margin pressure, let's say. But hey, that's kind of typical. That's been around for years. But add to it the hyper competition that's occurring now with new competitors that are entering the space, or customers sort of breaking the traditions of loyalty and picking their preferred vendor and sticking with them for long periods of time. people are shopping and hopping from vendor to vendor, from supplier to supplier. End customers are doing this like never before. And it's very disruptive, really threatening to the book of business that is being maintained by many B2B companies. And what about sellers and sales effectiveness? What's happening on that front? There are challenges there. We're hearing that sales teams are having far less time to spend with their customers. There's so many other things being requested of them. We're going to explore that in just a moment as well. More demands on their time, which means less time and less energy available to the actual work of selling, talking to buyers, promoting the product, working the deal. That creates another kind of pressure on the business, which is very damaging to both revenues and profits. And people are asking, what can I do about that situation? But let's explore just a moment more what happens for frontline commercial teams as a result of the seller experience and the customer's new buying behavior. Here's what we see in aggregate. Most B2B businesses are experiencing 3 or 4 of these phenomena, if not all. Sales has less time to spend in selling activities, more competitors than ever before, more channels. It could be, the Amazon business of the world coming in. It could be someone else that sprung up. It could be imports coming in from another part of the world that weren't hitting your shores before, and now they are. What are reps doing in exchange? They may be focusing on just the handful of customers that are the biggest ones in their portfolio because their portfolios have grown. They're now managing 200, 300 customers, and how can they possibly know them all? They can't. And so they focus on just a few. And the others, well, if they call me with a problem, I'll put some attention on them, but otherwise they might be ignored. And then those very same customers are less loyal. We're hearing about sales rep turnover. I've seen 2 different studies that show sales rep turnover is at a 5-year high, as much as 15% of the sales force turning over every year. So you're trying to onboard people, make them familiar with your vertical industry, with your product set, with your customers. So what does all this mean? Lost revenues and lost profits, and businesses are feeling it for all of these reasons. So that's sort of admiring the problem for a moment. Let's pivot and imagine sort of a perfect outcome. So I want to contrast, there's some pain in the marketplace today. Businesses are feeling it. It's real. It's identifiable, it's tangible, and we understand many of the reasons why it's happening. So if we contrast that, what would we like to be doing if we could do anything? I want to put this conceptual picture forward for a moment. Think about one customer in your portfolio. What does it mean for you to have value from, receive value from that customer relationship? Like, how do we conceive? Where does that value come from? Does it come from, as we see here on the y-axis, how much they spend, the revenue? Well, sure, that's one dimension. I think a second dimension on the z-axis there is the margin. What kind of profitability am I achieving for the products which I sell to them? And then finally, how long are they my customer? And in fact, if I take all 3 of these dimensions in a very abstract way, I would get some solid looking, rectangular structure like this, some 3-dimensional polygon, and I would say, that is representative of the value that a customer brings to me. The revenue that I receive and the margin and profits I get on that revenue and how long I'm able to maintain them as my customer and continue to sell to them, that's really their value to me as my customer. And so what am I seeking to do as the seller? Well, straightforward. It's what sales teams have been doing for years. I want to sell more product to this customer. And I want to receive more profits in the selling. That's the 2 big ambitions, right, for the business, top line and bottom line right there. And thirdly, I want to keep this customer for a longer period of time. If I can do 1, 2, or all 3 of these things at the same time, I will, by definition, increase this customer's lifetime value to my business and to my portfolio. And that's what we're going to talk about, how AI will enable this in a very specific and tangible way. But I wanted to paint that abstract vision for a moment. More product, more profit, more time. That's expanding the value of individual customers. And I want to do this over and over for every customer in my portfolio, not only the top 10 or 15 that I know intimately, like the back of my hand, but even for the 200 that I haven't spoken to in the last 6 months. And it sounds impossible using the sort of brute force methods that are done by many sales teams today, but there's a real power in bringing AI to this, and we're going to get into it. So I want to present what on the surface will seem a simple question, but I'll tell you in advance, Abdul, it's a little bit of a setup. It's a setup for the audience. I want each person who's listening to me to ask this question: what do you manufacture? Think about that for a moment, and in your mind, picture what your business is as a manufacturer. This very simple abstraction, you have plants and they're producing some widget, let's say. Here I've got some electrical component, and you have some understanding of how many millions of those do you produce in a year. In this example, 15 million, let's say, for that business. And when most manufacturers think of their business, they think of this: I have a plant, I make items in this large quantity, and I sell them. But I want to submit to you that there is something else going on. There is, in fact, a hidden manufacturing plant, factory, running inside your traditional factory. And that factory doesn't have machines on the shop floor. As you see here at the bottom, it's got people on telephones and in front of computers and looking at reports and data. And they're not manufacturing widgets. What are they manufacturing? They're manufacturing, for example, prices on price lists by region, by geography, prices in a price matrix. Here's your discount for various quantity breaks, prices on quotes and agreements by the thousands or tens of thousands of agreements. And it turns out that when you stop and look at a business and you ask, how many prices am I manufacturing inside my business? It is in the millions every year for a typical B2B business. It's just not hard to get to that point where you realize, just like we manufactured widgets one at a time and they came off the end of the assembly line, I have a hidden process, a shadow factory that is manufacturing prices by the millions, and they're rolling out through a different assembly line, the assembly line of the frontline commercial sales team. And I want to put this idea in your mind that, in fact, in addition to your well-known traditional factory, you are running a pricing factory in parallel, but you haven't thought of it this way. But there is power in so doing, because if you think of your pricing process as a price factory, then you'll realize I'm manufacturing prices. Each price is like a widget. I can judge its quality. I can talk about the quantity. I can ask how long did it take me to make it. I can design different prices for different purposes, just like I can design different products for different purposes. And so we can borrow many of the manufacturing best practices and apply them to our price factory. Now, that may be a radical idea. What do you mean I'm in the price manufacturing business? Well, you are, if you're a B2B business. And we're going to leverage a few things in particular that I know will be very familiar to this audience when I say a manufacturing best practice. I'm going to take these two, which are time-honored. They've been around for decades. And I think you wouldn't have to walk very far on the shop floor to find an example of where one, probably many of the things you're looking at and the initiatives you're aware of were driven by one of these two concepts: either lean, which in a nutshell we'll just characterize as eliminate the waste. And there are various kinds of waste in traditional lean manufacturing, 6, 7, 8, depending on who you're reading about and how those wastes impact the efficiency of the organization. But the big idea is to eliminate waste in the manufacturing of the widgets. And then Six Sigma, the idea is to reduce variation in processes, reduce variation in outcomes, in tolerances and so on of items that are manufactured. Those two ideas are both applicable to our pricing factory. So that's the conceptual setup, if you will. I want to apply these ideas into pricing. I want to use that lens. And I'm starting with pricing as a beginning point for one of the kinds of decisions that sales makes where AI is incredibly powerful. And toward the end of the presentation, I'll expand and we'll talk about other kinds of decisions, selling decisions that are made, not just about pricing, but about other parts of that customer three dimensions that we talked about, selling more product and keeping them for longer. We'll talk about that as well, but I'm going to pick on pricing here a little bit at the beginning. So if we want to ask ourselves, does it really make sense? Could I really apply my Lean or Six Sigma ideas that I know so well from the shop floor? Could I apply them to pricing? Well, I think to answer that question, we would say, well, let's take a look inside the pricing factory and see if we can find any place where there might be waste or variance. Well, let me offer a picture to you, what I think is actually a simplified picture, believe it or not, of what I have seen dozens of times when I look inside the B2B pricing factory that's running at businesses around the globe. That factory is a complicated place. There are so many actors involved: executives, product managers, pricing teams, IT people. This is all on the left side of the picture. Moving to the right, I've got sales ops, sales management, the customer. It could be distributors, partners, others that I haven't even drawn in this picture. So if I look inside the pricing factory and I ask the question, are there opportunities? Does it even suggest to me that there might be waste or variance going on? Oh yeah. Let me give one example illustrated by this picture. Right there in the center at the top, we see these, say, initiative triggers. Imagine something's happening in the marketplace. Supply-demand balance is shifting. Imagine something's happening in your plant. You've expanded capacity or decreased capacity, and you need to think about that, what it means to the orders and the prices that you charge. Perhaps material costs are going up at the same time. Those things might be the triggers. Those are flowing into the business, prompting others to say, ooh, we need to make a response. We need to make a response with respect to price. But how do we do that? Maybe the kind of response you're thinking about making is something that's never been analyzed before, or requires a lot of heavy lifting from the price manager and the IT group. And they have to go off and query a set of reports in order to understand what's happening right now and to look at the proposal that you have for price and decide what that might mean out to the rest of the business. And then they take those prices and they push them out over to the sales team on the right-hand side, and the sales team carries those out to customers, and guess what happens? 30% of the customers push back from the table and say, whoa, there's no way I can take that cost change that you're talking about. What are you thinking? And perhaps that generates a flood of price exception requests coming back into the business. And I'm just scratching the surface here, Abdul. We could spend a lot of time talking about these complicated cause and effect relationships and places where people are doing work manually or doing work in a brute force way, or a very, how do I want to say it? I guess doing things in a way that doesn't take advantage of the kind of information and signals that might be locked up in their data. One person is doing the best they can to make a quick decision. They only have 1 minute to spend on this decision. They have to move it off their plate because they have 20 others lined up behind it. So there's a lot of opportunity inside this messy environment. And if you haven't experience this inside your own B2B business. If you speak to those who are on the front lines or those who are in the back office working with the pricing processes, I think when you start asking, who does what when we have to make a price list change? What happens when we're pushing out new prices onto existing customers who are already on long-term agreements with us? What does that happen, and what kind of triggers and response do we get from the market when we do these actions? You're going to get an earful about what goes on, and it's messy. So let's take it down a level, and if we go back and think about lean for a moment, the big idea in lean is to eliminate waste. What kinds of wastes would we commonly find inside this pricing factory? Out of the 7 or 8 classical types of waste, here are the 3 that I've seen most commonly: defects, weighting, and motion. And let me give a simple illustration of each of these. A defect could be all the way at the upfront, where your pricing team published regional price list or an industry price list at the beginning of the year, but you know what? Those prices were so out of touch with the actual market value of the product that they should be considered defective prices. And what happens when you put such prices in the market? Customers will never buy at that price. And so if they want your product, but they reject that price, now they're back on your doorstep asking for a price exception. And it's not uncommon to hear manufacturers that say, yeah, I get tens of thousands of price exception requests every month that I have to satisfy. And this could be one of the root causes. So that's one defect. How about, let's spin it a little bit. Let's imagine that your pricing guidance is actually quite good. You've done a great job setting that industry price list or that country price list, and you've put that into the business, you've put it out in front of sales, but when they are standing in front of the customer, they disregard that. They discount at will, 15, 20, 25 off. We could also say that when someone prices a customer or a transaction out of compliance with good guidelines, that's another kind of defect. Let's move on. What about weighting? Remember those price exceptions we said might hit your door if you had bad guidance and you generated a set of exception requests? How long do you think it takes to work through 50,000 exception requests a month? The answer is a lot longer than you would wish. And I've seen organizations that have put literally dozens of people on this task. They've, over time, built up a deal desk or a price approval function or something like that that might have many, many FTEs devoted to this price exception approval task as a way of coping with the flood of exceptions they created by their defect. But even with those resources, it usually takes days or weeks to get an answer back on a quote. Honestly, I've yet to hear a frontline sales team that says, I get my quotes approved really quickly when I have to go up the chain, and I'm very satisfied with the service level. The much more common response is, they're killing me. I'm losing the business before I even get a chance to quote it. My competitors got a price on the street, and the deal's already lost before I even got back with my best and final price. Then why? People are waiting. So there's a real impact to that. And finally, motion. You submit the exception request, it goes up the chain, but what if the approver has to stop and go to database number 1 and spreadsheet number 2 and pull a report on what has this customer bought in the past, and then go over here and pull a third-party study that you had done last year on average price levels and try to pull all that together from various data sources and spreadsheets, and then come up with their own formula and idea for how we should therefore respond. It's a lot of wasted motion in the act of trying to approve these exception requests or trying to decide how to deal with price in a given situation. And I see this over and over. It's so common to B2B. So that's on the waste side, coming from the lean perspective. What about the Six Sigma, where the idea was to reduce variation? What kind of variations do we see? Well, these are ones that I think every commercial team has faced, and if you spent time in B2B selling or B2B pricing, you know that there's really sort of three things that you can say about a price when you put it in the market. Either it was underpriced, it was somehow below the market value, or maybe it was overpriced, even if you got away with it, or maybe it was right priced, it was on target. And these percentages that you see here, we've had the benefit at Zilliant of looking at hundreds of B2B data sets over the decades. And when we've done the assessment, kind of averaged it out over the long baseline, this is about what I expect to see when I look in a typical B2B business, that 50% of the transactions in, say, a 2-year history, when I put them through a rigorous analysis, I'm going to ultimately conclude that about half of those likely to be underpriced to some degree. And that represents lost profits to the business, failure to capture the full value. And another 20% are going to be overpriced. And I'll say two things about that. You might have, if I'm looking in transaction history, then to find these overpriced, well, by definition, you're actually selling that product to that customer. But that is business that is actually at risk. You might not realize it yet, but if you're charging someone more than the market value, it might not take long under this new environment for your competitor to come around and point that out. And then they're going to start, taking your customer away. So you may think it's a little bit all right to be on the high side today. I would say be careful. You want to be aligned to the market, because if not, you're putting good business at risk. And the other hidden thing that I think most people don't recognize, but is a very real phenomena, is if your business is reacting as many do, and when you sort of decide you're going to get rigorous about price and you put some hard limits in place, and you're going to force commercial teams, you're going to compel them to follow your guidance, let's say, but your guidance is wrong. Let's say your guidance is a little bit too high, then you're losing share because you priced yourself out of some good business that you wanted to receive. And so you may have lost business that I can't even see in your transactions data set. That's a result of places where you've overpriced. So you can get stung a couple of ways through overpricing as well, although it's the less common phenomena. Finally, you might say 30% on target. Is that good, bad? I mean, this is what I see on average, but so what? How do we assess whether that's a good percentage or a bad percentage to be on target? Well, let me ask it this way. Remember, I'm running a pricing factory here. If I want to know whether being on target 30% is acceptable, well, let me ask the question on your widget factory, the one you're known for. If only 30% of your widgets met their manufacturing tolerance, would that be okay in your business? I don't think so. I think you would declare an emergency. You would stop the line. You would go figure out what is happening, because 70% of our products aren't passing QA. And at the end of the line, we're having to go back for rework. Completely unacceptable. And God forbid that we should take those products, those widgets that don't meet the tolerance, and ship them out to our customers. If we did that, we would absolutely destroy our reputation. We would harm our customers whenever they take our product and do what they do with it. We might even end up, in legal trouble for doing that knowingly. And yet in the shadow factory, in the pricing factory, man, we're shipping out broken prices every day, and no one seems to even be aware, or it certainly doesn't trigger the kind of alarms that it would if it were the widgets. And I think maybe it should. There is a compound effect. This idea is a little bit subtle, but manufacturers very, very skilled at running cost improvement projects. I'm sure everyone here can think of 2 or 3 that were undertaken in the last year in your business. So there was a study done by Alex Partners a couple of years back where they asked their survey respondents, what kind of savings were you targeting? And maybe more importantly, what did you realize, or what did you report out as the realized savings from that cost initiative? And you'll see here on the x-axis, it could be less than 1%, or 1 to 2, 3 to 4. And what I want to call out is that about 2/3 will see somewhere between 0 5%. Okay, I'm not here to pick on those cost initiatives. I'm not here to say is 5% a good enough amount, but I could acknowledge if you do several of these initiatives over time and they stick, that's going to add up. 2% here, 5% there. That's going to make a difference. But does it? Does it stick? Does it make a difference? Same survey asked a follow-on question. To what degree do you believe those reported savings? And do you believe it really dropped to the bottom line? Let's put it that way. Did it really show up in the bottom line? Did it make an impact at the end of the day? And was it sustainable? And what percentage? About 3/5 or 60% of those survey respondents said, you know what? Either it made less than half of the difference that we reported. You know, my gut tells me that it was actually half as effective as reported. It might have been reported that way for other reasons, but in reality, I just didn't see it show up in the bottom line, or it wasn't sustainable. Now, this is about other projects. This is shop floor, plant kind of cost savings things. So why am I talking about those projects when I've just been speaking on the Lean and Six Sigma ideas applied to pricing? I have a speculation, or actually a theory, on a contributing factor, a hidden, invisible hand that causes these other initiatives not to show up with the impact they should have. And here's what I believe it is. While these cost-saving projects are working so hard to gain, let's say, 2% savings, 200 basis points in cost savings on the shop floor, and it may take a year and millions of dollars invested in that initiative to finally get to the place where you feel like we've done it. We've gained that 200 basis points in cost. Fantastic. Can't wait for that to drop to the bottom line. But you know what happens the month after that initiative or the quarter after that initiative, when commercial teams are standing on the front line and they're talking to customers and they're doing those, they're allowing the waste and the variance to get into their pricing discussion? It is incredibly easy for frontline commercial team to turn around and give a 5% discount just because the customer appeared to flinch at the initial price. Or if 5% doesn't work, if the customer says, is that the best you could do? They might drop immediately to 10%. Giving away 3 to 5 times the cost savings that you took quarters to earn on the shop floor. So do you see what I'm saying? You've got this set of initiatives that are working so hard to generate a cost savings inside the business. And maybe you really did, in essence, you touched a real intangible problem and you made a difference in that problem, but it never translated to the bottom line. Why? Because at a different stage, over in your shadow factory, your pricing factory, a little bit later in time, someone was making a decision there that gave away all of the savings that you gained in your cost initiative in the plant last year, plus a whole lot more. They just completely offset all the good that you did by a wasteful or a highly variant price decision. I think that would be shocking if we really get our vision around this. We would be disturbed by the idea that poor price quality in my price factory is effectively transferring all of those savings from my Lean and Six Sigma projects inside the plant. It's really transferring those benefits away from your company and into the pockets of your customers, because that's who benefits mostly when you make these kind of price mistakes. That may take a little while to sink in. It might come to you tomorrow about, oh my goodness. But it's another reason. Yes, we want to get price right for its own sake, and doing so brings value strictly through the pricing function. But I also want to point out that if you're not doing it, you may be giving away the benefits that you've been earning with blood, sweat, and tears in other parts of the business, and that's twice the crime, I think, in many ways. All right, I want to keep moving. There's just a little bit more to share here about what is the situation businesses find themselves in, what are the kinds of opportunities, and then we're going to turn and look at how do we solve this. Okay, so set up on what's the problem. We're going to talk about how we solve it. I've been using pricing as my example of frontline awareness, frontline decisions, and when you make those well or not well, how does that impact what's going on in B2B performance? But pricing's not the only area. There are other areas where sales teams need to be aware and need to be equipped. Because we've had the benefit of looking at so many transaction sets over the decades, in fact, over 1 billion order line transactions that we've touched in our corporate history, and we have subjected those to a rigorous analysis that allowed us to create some benchmark data on the kinds of problems, commercial sales effectiveness problems and pricing problems. And in the aggregate, I want to lift up 4 areas to you and give you a range, a quantified range on how much this problem is impacting the typical B2B business. The first area is a revenue area, a revenue loss area that comes when you don't see the early warning signs that a customer is starting to defect. Maybe they drop a product category here or there. Maybe they slow down their orders. And then next thing you know, they've switched over to someone else entirely. And by the time you figure it out, they're way down the road. They've already got their online order system integrated with the EDI, integrated with the other supplier, and you're just out in the cold. When we've measured the effect, how often is that happening? And it's kind of straightforward to look in the transaction data and see customers that were here last year that aren't here now. We've discovered that phenomena is anywhere between 3% of revenue up to as much as 15% of revenue at the high end is being lost through this churn, attrition and defection every year. The average is about 9. That's a big area. Here's another revenue area, untapped by many sales organizations. What about for my customer that's a solid customer? They're not leaving, they're not at risk of churning, but I'm not selling all that I could to them. I have a low wallet share, but maybe I don't know it. Or maybe I know I have a low wallet share, but I don't really know what products I could or should be speaking to them about for cross-sell or upsell. And we've measured that phenomena, and the median amount of revenue that's missed every year for failure to understand cross-sell and upsell opportunities is about 7% of revenue. Could you imagine just solving any one of these, either of these problems? Even at a fraction of its median value, might add 5 points top line revenue right away without, acquiring a single new customer, without bringing new products into the catalog. Boy, that's amazing. And it would be very impactful to the sales function if they're able to do something about this, and we'll show what they can do. In the upper right here, I'm showing the profits from pricing, and we've been talking about the pricing story this morning, but just to put quantification on it, we see when we've quantified it, B2B businesses are losing a profit dollar amount that's anywhere from 1.9% times their revenue, as much as 16, but the median is about 5. So think of your business. What are your revenues? Let's say they're $1 billion, just for round figures. Take 5% of that factor, or 5% of that revenue. That's 5 million. Chances are you've got a $5 million profit loss through waste and variance in your pricing. And there are ways to diagnose that deeper and more specific for an individual business, but that's the average across hundreds of B2B companies where we've done this measurement. And then finally, lost productivity for the many people that are associated with all of these functions, trying to do things the way they're doing it now. If you just add up the labor costs, don't even think about the opportunity cost, which is a far bigger number, but just the labor costs for hiring people to do things that machines could do better, or hiring them to handle things that are consequential activities that wouldn't have happened if you made a better decision upstream. That could be anywhere as high as, another full point of revenue. So there's big opportunity here in B2B, and it's coming from several areas. So now let me turn the story. we're going to get into what does good look like? How can we do better? And I want to reorient us back to this picture. Remember that maximizing the customer lifetime value means I'd like to sell more product, I would like to do it more profitably, and I would like to keep this customer for a long time. And if I do any or all of these together, that's where my value is coming from. Let's take a look. How could I do it? Well, imagine this for a moment. This is a thought exercise. Imagine for a moment that it were possible that your very best people in the organization, you've got sharp folks, by the way, in your B2B organization, you have people today that really do understand market conditions, that understand dynamics, that are very analytical, know how to read the tea leaves, know how to negotiate well, understand how products are related to each other, know the value that your products have in the market, so on. What if you could take your best salesperson, your best pricer, your best buyer or procurement person, your best product manager or plant manager, your best financial analyst? What if this team of experts in your business could evaluate every product in your catalog, tens of thousands of them, and every customer that you're selling to right now, maybe hundreds of thousands of customers, and every combination, each customer buying which product? If they could look at that every day and recommend what you should do, are they showing signs of defection? Are we slightly underpriced? Is it taking too long to get our quotes back? If that team could do this impossible thing on the right-hand side, can't you imagine what that would mean for your top and bottom lines? The profitable growth we've been talking about, selling more product, doing it more profitably, keeping this customer for longer. Yes, all of those would be possible if I could have the very best available continuously to look deeply into my business for every product, every customer, every day, and tell me what I should do. That's not possible in the human domain. We don't have enough, we don't have 1 million hours in a week, and there's no conference line that we could get everyone on and comb through the business at that level of granularity, which is why no one thinks about this today. This is why this is a kind of a tough thing to imagine if you just think about doing it with people. But with AI-enabled software solutions, this is absolutely doable. And here I want to give, if you will, the best definition for artificial intelligence in this context, I believe, is artificial intelligence, quite simply, is teaching a machine to imitate intelligent human behavior. And we have some great intelligence going on with this set of experts here. So the vision is we need to train the machine to do what these experts would do, to see the world the way they would see it, and bring us a consensus opinion that looks like what the humans would give us if we could turn them loose on every customer, every product. And then we'll point the AI engine at every customer, every product, every day, and let it recommend those actions. That's how we get there. So what might that mean when you bring together intelligence and action? Intelligence such as looking at every customer granularly and continuously, quantifying the full potential of that customer. I may be getting just a part of the business today. What business could I be doing with them? And specifically where? What categories might I be selling more product in? Which SKUs are the most common SKUs that people are buying in those categories where I should be expanding? What is the health of this customer? What is their pricing health? What is their breadth of products they're buying from me? Identify those hidden pockets of opportunity. The intelligence can get in and see both the big and the small. And in many cases, it's by adding up the pennies that you end up getting the big difference. There might not be a huge gain in any single customer, but if you have a series of small gains across every customer, when you add that up, it's profound. And intelligence should be looking at any and all available data. And at the end of the day, that intelligence needs to be simple in its delivery and something that a human can execute on, because this is where the action comes into play with people. And you want to root that deeply into the organization by taking this intelligence component out of the AI and embedding that into real action plans. The AI can actually sequence up a series of insights for specific named customers, named products, named opportunities, and put those into a salesperson's diary or put them in a list and say, go after them this week in this order, and here's what you're going to talk about. Here's what you're going to say. That intelligence should be embedded everywhere that sales is interfacing with their customer or customer systems. And we'll show some examples in a moment. If you have a CRM system where sales is planning and strategizing and managing their accounts, put this intelligence there. If sales is in the order system, put it there. If customers are, or if your call center is using yet a third system to handle customer inbound orders, put the intelligence there. Put it anywhere it needs to be so that the humans who are making decisions can do so based on this intelligence that the AI has surfaced. And use this to drive better manager and rep collaborations in the sales team, for example. Executives can even think about campaigns they want to drive in the business. It might be a market share expansion into a new region, where the AI would say, well, in order to do that, you need to make this kind of price adjustment, and you need to strive to lead with the following products. And then those prices and those products can be served up as action items to the sales reps in that territory with specific accounts that they should be pursuing. And you could even create a great closed loop accountability where we can ask and answer the question, for all of these intelligent insights delivered to the frontline sales, what did they do with them? Which ones did they follow up on? What did the customer say? Which of those turned into business? Which didn't? You can get some great closed loop accountability. At the systems level, if some of you are asking sort of how is that done, it still feels a little conceptual. Here's an abstract picture, and then I'm going to show you some real world screens that sales reps would see in their day-to-day life. But in essence, starting from the left, looking through all the rich data sources available in your organization, products, customers, CRM data, market data, win-loss data, e-commerce, whatever you have, in whatever form you have it, seek to exploit the information value in that data, extract the essential signals with AI in order to generate specific insights, as you see here, and we've in the center, and we've discussed various types. It might be, what product should I offer as a cross-sell? What price should I put on this quote? And there are all sorts of other things we can alert the front line to, driven from AI algorithms. Once we've found the insights, then we want to convert those into action plans where we can prioritize which actions are the most important ones for sales reps to follow up, because they have finite time. And the AI is going to find millions of potential actions, but some are more important than others. Let's prioritize. Then let's assign them. Let's measure. And then, as you see in the lower right, let's put those insights and let's put those actions in every tool that someone's using. Well, let's look at those tools. Actually, just before we look at those tools, so if you had to summarize it, I would say it this way. The AI is functioning as a personal, prescriptive sales analyst. You know, if you went forward, if sales management went forward with the suggestion that for each sales rep in the business, you would hire an additional person to the organization, an assistant who would comb through the data and look for the opportunities and tee up all of the actions for the sales rep so they could take their run sheet every day or every week and just go make it so. I'm confident that that suggestion would be shot down immediately. You would effectively be doubling the number of people in sales by asking to add one analyst for every sales rep. Even if you add at a 10-to-1 ratio or 100-to-1, you just can't get there with people. But the AI is going to give you a virtual sales analyst for every sales rep. And you know what that analyst will tell you on a daily basis by monitoring all the signals and being as wise as the wisest pricer and salesperson and category manager and financial analyst in the company. They're going to tell you which customers to call on, what products to talk to them about, and what price to quote. And if we enable sales to do these three things very well, we are absolutely driving top and bottom line performance to the profitable growth goal. Here's some examples now. Let's take a look at, this is a dashboard that we've created in one of our applications where I'm going to zoom in here for just a moment. Out of all of the actions that may be available for some customer somewhere in this portfolio of several hundred that this sales rep is responsible for, there are exactly 7 that have been identified where the customer is showing early signs or severe signs of defection. They're about to churn, and somebody needs to do something about it to prevent that. You want to win this customer back before they're gone. You want to keep them in the boat. So the AI has not only found those situations, detected them in the data, and then generated an action, but now we've prioritized and organized those actions so the sales rep can log in today and say, oh, I've been alerted to these customers. They have a problem. These are the 7. I'm very interested in that because I sure don't want to lose good customers that I already have. Let me take a look at those. So they click view all, and I see the list. Here are those customers. And look at that. I see their names, and the spend health is being judged here by the AI, just like my panel of experts might have judged it. Here's one that's showing a decline. Here's one that's showing a severe risk versus an early decline. So I have degrees of severity that I need to respond to. And I get some other information on these customers as well. Maybe I see other quality indicators such as their pricing health or total opportunity or trailing 12-month sales revenue. All sorts of rich KPIs can be configured here. So I've gone from the world of insights and actions to a specific type of action, customers that are about to churn. I've seen a list of those which are the candidates for that need attention. Let me just drill into one of them. I'll pick the second one on that list there, applied technology. Let's see what the AI is showing me about that. Here's the punchline. It says, out of all the things this customer buys, and they may have hundreds of SKUs that they purchase from us because they're doing, $250,000 in revenue. I can see here at the top. Out of all the things they buy, it's this bolt category where the red bar is showing us they had been doing $3,000 a month, and they're not doing that anymore. What happened? What happened to that revenue? It went away. Did you know? Well, probably not. I mean, this customer is not one of your biggest customers. They're way down in the long tail of medium to smaller size customers, and they're buying 15 different product categories from you perhaps. So when they drop off in one product category that's just 3,000, you probably don't have any report that causes that to pass your notice. But here the AI is going to serve it up to you and say, you need to talk to them about that. Go for it. Call Applied Technologies, find out what happened to this bolt business. Maybe they don't need that product anymore, but the more likely explanation is they've given it to someone else. And what starts as one category can end up to be the whole book of business if you're not careful. So get in there. And while you're at it, as it turns out, this customer also has some opportunities to grow in other categories. So first action is make sure we don't lose the business we already have. But while you've got them on the phone or somewhere in your account strategy, you want to think about expanding to the nuts and the spacers as well. So that's just a quick example to show you what would a sales team experience on the front line with AI. Well, they don't see any highly technical or complicated things. It's simple and straightforward. Talk to this account about this product because the concern is they've stopped buying it and we need to know why. Let's show another example. I'm going to jump into, here's a case where I'm looking at an agreement. I have a long-term agreement with my customer. and I've committed to them for the next 12 months. They're going to buy a set of products at a certain price, but what price should I set for them? What is the right price to charge? Now, in the past, I've been using my gut. I've been using my experience. I asked the sales rep who sits next to me in the office. I asked my regional manager how they would price it. But now I have my artificial intelligence system in place, and it's looking at all of the factors and combining the wisdom of all of the data and thinking like experts think, all of the experts in the business, and it's making recommendations to me in the form of price guidance. And it's suggesting to me that the number one item on the top of this list, my rivet, should be given at a 17% discount from list, not the 20% value that I thought I was going to go for here. 17 is more aligned with market. Now, I may still need to go with 20. That's a part of my job as a sales professional. I'm going to ultimately make that decision, and according to the policy of my business, I may have some discretion to do that. But the AI's best guidance is be at 17.4. And then so on. What about this washer? What should the price be? AI is suggesting it's around $1,000. We've got some guardrails there, high and low. Look at this third line, for example, my bolt category. The discount range that I should be considering for this product is somewhere between 2% off of list and as deep as 5% off of list, with the sweet spot being about 3.5. So when I'm negotiating this product with this customer, given all the factors that the AI knows about them, how much they spend, the vertical industry they're in, the geography, et cetera, the type of product this is, the range should be, let's say, 2 to 5%, and I should try to get around 3.5. But if the customer says they need 20 off on this, they are way out of band. The AI is telling me there's no data to support a price point down there. All of the comparable sales are happening in this range of 2 to 5, and that's where we should be. So that's an example of getting price. And then if I have that price guidance, look at some simple things I can do back in my agreement. I can put a health calculation on every line item. And you see here, we've used a little color coding scheme. The top 5 lines, they're looking good. They have a green check mark. They're priced sufficiently according to the guidance. So I would score those lines as fine. Sales rep, doing a great job. These 2 lines at the bottom, we need to be sure that we're sure, because one of those is a little bit below the market price, below the target, the one that's got the yellow triangle. The one with the red circle is way below the reasonable minimum for this product under these selling circumstances. So is that a mistake? Do we want to do that on purpose? Should we hang on to should we hang in there and fight for the market price? That's a call we have to make as professionals, but the AI is alerting us that that's where we need to invest our mental energy and make our best judgment call by using the AI guidance and deciding what we're going to do. So you might be asking, all right, sounds great. Sure, there's software out there. Does it really make a difference? Does it really work? I mean, this is a pretty new and different concept in a lot of ways. Can I really train an AI to think like experts? Can I really identify and prioritize this kind of actions and put them in front of sellers? And if I were to do it, what difference would it make? Here's one example from among many out of our customer base. This was an equipment manufacturer. Industrial equipment is motion and fluid control, to be specific. And they were using the AI that identifies customers at risk for churning, as well as the cross-sell and upsell. So it was a revenue generation top line kind of play, and they had a fantastic outcome. There were, if you look in the upper right there, 4,500 times where the AI identified specific actions for them around churning, cross-sell, and upsell, where they actually acted on it and won that business with the customer. or preserve that business. There were many more generated. They might have tried and the customer said, no, thank you, I'm going a different way, or no, I don't use that product. But 4,500 times, the AI gave something that the sales team went to and it hit the bullseye. And the result of that was they picked up 21% improvement in revenue for that portfolio of customers where this was applied. A really outstanding result, and many other benefits that they received as well in terms of the effectiveness of the sales team and the use of their time on a calendar basis. But certainly from a revenue perspective, that was an outstanding result from applying the AI. So here's where we are, and this is the wrap up to the formal presentation. The future is now. The situation that I described seems futuristic, letting the AI equip frontline commercial teams to make better decisions about which customers to speak to, what products to sell, what price to charge them. But it's here. And so you should ask yourself these questions very seriously. Is every one of my prices calibrated to maximize the value of each transaction? And is every one of my sales reps really equipped to maximize the customer lifetime value, getting more of that product and keeping the customer for longer each time they're interacting with their customers? They can be, and I would submit to you, you want them to be. Abdul?
Barrett, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I found it very educational, if you don't mind me saying. You've taken what might have been a dry subject for outsiders like myself, people who are not salespeople, and made it very informative. I liked your very accurate, I suppose, explanations or definitions of what Lean and Six Sigma are. So I do appreciate things like that. I've got loads of questions. I don't know where to start. But let's start with the basics about Zilliant. It looks like a really impressive, complex system or software. How long does it take to implement or integrate into one of your customers' systems? I appreciate that you've been going for many, many years, so maybe it's evolved along with your relationship with your customers. But say if you had a new customer who wanted to implement your system, how long would it take for you to integrate it with their, what is it that you do? Is it integrate it with the ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning software, or what is it? How does it work?
Yes, so I'm glad you're asking. And indeed, over the last 15 years, we've found the right ways to make that a smooth and rapid process. So when we're integrating things like the churn alerts and cross-sell and upsell, to configure the AI to find those actions and to deliver those is really quite short. It can be 10 to 12 weeks, and we've got that up and going. Maybe even quicker if we're using simpler forms of delivery. We can deliver those actions, for example, as an email right to someone's inbox. So the integration there is as simple as, let's get a list of the email addresses for all the sales reps. We can also embed it into CRM systems or ERP systems. It might take 2 or 3 weeks more to present those embedded in context, but still you're thinking within a quarter, within 90 days, you can have those insights up and going and making a difference for the business. And on the pricing side, it's just a few weeks more, 13 to 15 weeks. And we can have the AI engine trained to generate the best price for every situation and have that delivered out where it needs to be, to your ordering tools, to your existing quoting tools if you have them. Or we could also provide powerful quoting front-end tools. And you saw some of our front-end quoting tools in the screenshots that I gave, but we're perfectly comfortable putting that guidance into existing quoting tools with which the business is likely already very familiar.
Right, and how is Zilliant, this software of yours, categorized? How is it described? The closest thing I can think of is what's known as CPQ. I think it's called CPQ, standing for configure price quote. It's not the same. I can appreciate that. But what is how do you categorize your software?
Yes, we're in a category that's adjacent to CPQ actually, and most of the industry analysts who cover this, such as Gartner, will refer to it as price optimization and management for the pricing side. They call it PO&M, price optimization and management. And on the sales effectiveness side, where these other insights, cross-sell, upsell, I actually don't know what category name you would put it in. It's sort of a newly emerging thing to be finding these kinds of signals. A lot of attention in the past, AI has focused heavily on how to evaluate and score new customers who are not yet doing business with you, and there's a category and name for that. It's lead scoring, for example, or prospecting. But our focus here, if you caught the difference today, is what about those customers who are already my customers? This is probably where 80 to 90% of my revenue is coming from, is from repeat customers. What kind of AI insights can we detect for my current customers? And I would put that title probably under sales effectiveness or maybe opportunity management.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It did occur to me. I wonder if it is a newly emerging field of software, if you like. If even you're not sure about the categorization, it must be something quite new. But if you can actually maybe elaborate on that aspect of it, and let's imagine there's a market there. There are other companies like yours, either offering similar things, or there might be some overlap with, I don't know, for example, CPQ kind of companies. What are the innovations in your market or in your company that you think will make a big difference going forward? Certainly the AI that you've described, the way it can analyze thousands upon thousands of individual accounts, customer accounts, and then decide what price to quote them, whether they, you're in danger of losing their business and so on. It's a very, very sophisticated thing that it can do. And I imagine that will continue to evolve. So maybe you'd want to talk about that. But, generally speaking, what are the innovations that you think will make a big difference to your business going forward?
Let me mention two to sort of compare and contrast with solutions that I think are familiar to us. First, let's take CPQ. So CPQ, configure price quote. What I've observed by and large is the P in CPQ, that pricing capability, actually is doing one of two sort of very simple things. The price is either a lookup of a price, kind of a simple database lookup. The customer added this product to the quote, and I just need to go fetch the price. The assumption is the price is sitting there. Maybe there's kind of a built-in idea that everyone's paying the same price. I'm going to go fetch the list price. A slightly more sophisticated CPQ may have a price formula where certain adjustments are being made. If the order quantity is above 1,000, I'm giving a 5% discount. And someone had to sit down and create that rule for the CPQ, but the CPQ will use that to get some pricing that doesn't seem like a silly price, one price for every customer, for every quantity, every time, but it will have a price that varies a little bit according to one or two dimensions, maybe order quantity and maybe geography in that price rule. And that's sort of where CPQ is likely to stop. So the innovation that Zilliant's bringing is when we're calculating optimized prices, we're not just looking at one or two factors. We may be looking at 10 or 12 factors, and no human on the Zilliant side or your side, the company side, has constructed a rule that says when the quantity is above 1,000, I wish to give a 5% discount. Instead, we've let the AI engine answer the question for us. What are the quantity breaks that are naturally occurring in the market? Is 1,000 even the right quantity level, or should it be 2,000 or 3,000? The AI will tell us that. And then we ask second question, and when we reach that quantity threshold, what is the discount that should be given according to the signals that we're getting from the data, which are telling us how the market what the market expects, how the market values our product when they're buying at those higher quantity levels. So the AI is a much deeper and a much more dynamic number for what that price should be under a quantity break scenario. And it's constantly updating itself. Every week we're bringing in new sales transactions, adding it to the history, and letting the AI examine that. And the AI could change its mind. It could change its mind in 2 or 3 weeks and say, I think we're going to need to shift that quantity break a little bit. I think we're going to need to adjust that price point at the quantity break a little bit because I'm sensing something different in the market. And the CPQ rule that I described is simply unable to think or respond in that way. So that's optimization. That's a innovation coming from optimization that contrasts with how CPQ handles pricing. My second example would be, how do our insights differ from CRM? Maybe some of our sales insights, like churn and cross-sell. What I see in too many B2B businesses, I believe this is sort of a well understood but disappointing reality about CRM. Is CRM tends to be woefully underutilized in many companies, even given the investment levels they've put into it. And on average, CRM is being used as a contact management tool, but not an effective sales strategy and planning and analysis tool for salespeople. So to unpack those labels a little bit, contact management, I got the name of my customer, the email address, their physical address, their phone number, and I'm putting some notes in there that say, I need to call them on Monday next week, I need to visit on Friday, and perhaps your manager is forcing you to put in your follow-up notes once you come back from the sales call. All right, I talked to them about product X, and they said maybe later, and gee, aren't we all disappointed? So that's what I see happening most commonly in CRM. It's tracking a set of activities ex post fact, and it's keeping minimal information about the customer, like name, address, and phone number. What does Zilliant do? What innovations do we bring on top of that with AI? Instead of just capturing the conversation you had in the past with that customer once you get done with the visit, we're injecting future-looking ideas about what you should be talking about. We're making suggestions. You need to speak to this customer about a certain product. And if you embed that into the CRM, now the CRM is not just a place you go to record your notes after the customer meeting. It's the place you go to plan what that meeting is going to be about. What am I going to talk about when I'm there? And in fact, how about this simple task? Which customer should I see this week? It's amazing when I hear how various reps go about this, various businesses. Some will take their territory and divide it up into small regions, and their intention is to go to different parts of the territory and visit every customer on that street that day. And they're going to visit every customer once a month. Or others are going to wait until the phone rings, and they're going to handle things when the customer prompts for an interaction. But our innovation is we can tell based on the customer's buying behavior when it is time for you to initiate an engagement with the customer. And if we embed that into CRM, now CRM is not a passive tool that just collects what you've done after the fact on the accounts that you decided to visit because you always do all the accounts starting with letter A through C in the first week of the month, and you do D through F in the second week of the month, or whatever your algorithm is, this postal code and that postal code. Instead, CRM is saying, you need to talk to these 4 customers this week because they're the most important and they're showing signs that they need attention now. So that's a pretty big innovation, to let the CRM tell you which accounts you should be paying attention to instead of you deciding on your own and then just making notes into the CRM records after the fact.
Yeah, I think maybe more closer to the description would be that, the CRM, because customer relations management software is probably closer to your offering, the Zilliant software. I don't know, but anyway, people are always looking to categorize things, so that's what I'm trying to do. But about the AI that you've developed, can you give us an insight into how you went about doing that? Because you've been around for obviously a long time, 20 years. I imagine that you built it from scratch, possibly using technology that are fairly newly available. A lot of the machine learning innovations have become more accessible in recent years, only in the last 5 years or something. I don't know, but give us an insight into how your company went about developing this AI system of yours.
Yeah, that's great. In fact, in the early years, going back, 2 decades, there were not commercial AI engines or algorithms available. And we created our own, purpose-built, to solve and search for and solve for specific kinds of insights and actions. In fact, we have patents on several of those that we developed in those early years. What's happened in the last 4 or 5 is there's been literally an explosion, both in terms of algorithmic approaches, coming out of research and coming out of industry, just new and innovative ways to construct AI engines themselves. Many of you have probably heard of neural networks as an example, one way, or you might have heard specific techniques. Random forest is a kind of AI technique, or Bayesian hierarchical shrinkage. These techniques have been invented in the last several years, and then they've been implemented and made available in commercial technology, software technology, and we leverage those best of breed components off the shelf. Once you have those engines, the engines, if you will, are a little bit generic. They don't know what problem you want them to solve, but you train them to solve specific problems by informing them with data in a problem domain and helping them understand what it is you're seeking to do. And so we're leveraging those technologies, and then we're training the engine specifically. This is a sales problem we want to solve. The problem is one of detecting customer churn, for example. Here are the relevant inputs, and we evaluate which models and which algorithms are most effective at producing the sort of insights and intelligent actions that actually make sense. And then that's what we're using these days, off-the-shelf components, but our value add is to train them for this specific domain, B2B selling, and the specific signals we're looking for: upsell, cross-sell, customer churn, and price optimization.
Okay, and I think finally, I'll probably ask something that is a little bit broader, if you like. This concept of IT, OT convergence, information technology and operations technology convergence of the 2 areas of industrial companies. Since you do work with industrial companies and have had a long history of doing so, what would be your observations about the main aspects of it, main features of the convergence of those 2 areas, which until maybe 10, 15 years ago, probably even more recently, were kind of separate? You got your OT, which is the machines and things,
Yes.
And you got your IT, which sometimes didn't even feature in a manufacturing plant. But now, of course, all machines have sensors. They send data back to computers, and all sorts of other things are happening. The convergence of the two is happening. What are your observations, since you are in this area of software, especially artificial intelligence?
Yes, my perspective there is that I think it's abundantly clear that there are tremendous benefits from that convergence, and it's happening on the shop floor, it's happening in the factory, it's happening in the distribution facilities and so on. And what's amazing to me, Abdul, is in the physical domain, in that part of the business, which is making the widgets, shipping the widgets, delivering widgets, and so on, the IT and OT convergence is far ahead from what I see as a parallel convergence that can be happening over on the sales and marketing side of the business. So my observation here, my perspective is, I think that the sales functions have a lot to learn just by looking inside their own organization. And that some of these same ideas, when we see the power of bringing IT and OT together on the shop floor, why then is it so difficult for us to imagine what it might be like, or what would be the analogous play to bring IT and operations together? If you will, think of it as sales operations, okay? That operationing, price operations. We should be thinking about combining IT and that kind of OT, the front office OT, not just the manufacturing plant OT. And I think we have a lot to learn on the commercial front lines just by examining the good things that are happening, the patterns of good things that are happening in our own manufacturing plant, and asking, why don't we imitate that same pattern? Why don't we drive the same convergence in the front office that we're seeing back in the plant? And if we do, I believe that sales is going to find themselves getting the same dramatic improvements in effectiveness that we hear about are happening in the plant all the time. And right now, sales is sort of behind. In fact, I think they're 10 to 15 years behind in terms of that kind of innovation, and they really need to take a lesson from their brothers over in the factory. I believe that businesses should be aware that these solutions are tested and proven in a wide variety of industrial situations. There's decades of experience and proof points, so we're not talking about a scary, untested thing. We're talking about very well-founded and robust technology. We're talking about smooth and polished implementation processes, and they owe it to themselves to take a serious look at how AI can benefit them in their frontline commercial operations. The results will speak for themselves. The ROIs are astounding.
Okay, Barrett, thank you very much for your time and your insights.
Send us an email at sales@roboticsandautomationnews.com to register for one of our many upcoming webinars. And if you'd like us to host your webinar, we have a range of options, including long-term lead generation packages and marketing campaigns. We look forward to hearing from you soon.